Hey, Vlad here, devinside.com. Welcome to another video. Today we're playing with fzf, a general purpose command line fuzzy finder that will change your life. Let's get right to it. If you're new here, you should probably know that this is mostly a Scala channel. However, from time to time, I like to make videos about all kinds of things related to software development, like this one. With that out of the way, let's talk about FZF. I have many videos about all kinds of command line tools, and in a lot of them I say something like, oh, and by the way, you can totally pipe this thing into FZF. And also I say many times that I should totally make a video about FZF one day. Well, that day has come. FZF is one of those game-changing tools. Once you encounter it, you're going to be wondering, how did I live without it all these years? Following the Nix philosophy, FZF is a small-ish tool that does only one thing, but it does it well. You take any kind of list, you pipe it into FZF, which allows you to, well, fuzzy find the item you're looking for, and then once found, the item is simply printed back to you. On one hand, that's all it does, but on the other, you can spend years thinking about the infinite use cases for this. Let me stop talking and let's get our hands dirty. Now, for historical reasons, I have always been a Windows user. However, since around 2013, I've been running anything remotely related to software development inside of virtual machines, and recently I switched to WSL2, and I already made a couple of videos about it. And so today we're going to use one of my distributions, which runs Ubuntu 20.04. FZF has been around since 2013, and over the 7 years of its existence, it accumulated more than 32,000 stars and more than 100 people contributed to it. And so it shouldn't come as a surprise that there are millions of ways to install it, and every distribution has it in its own package manager. That said, a long time ago, I pretty much gave up on package managers. You never know what's in there, you never know where it's coming from. And so I created, sort of accidentally, I created a poor man's package manager. So I'm going to show it to you. So if you go to install.devinside.com, you will be redirected to my GitHub profile, and GitHub will search for my install-repositories, and I have many of them. Okay, and you can also search. Okay, so you can do install, and then in the end you can do /fzf, for example. Okay, and you will find this one, install fzf. The way my scripts work is that you always just copy paste these two lines. The first one downloads this script over here, the second one makes it executable and simply runs it. In this particular case, I'm simply going to copy these two lines, and I'm also going to open the script in a different tab so that we can take a look at it. So we're going to install fzf by simply cloning the Git repository. That's all my script is doing. It checks whether it's already there. If it is there, then it simply updates it, and if it's not there, then it simply clones the repository and runs the install script. By the way, even if you're installing it through a package manager, you still should run this install script. All right, so I copied these two lines. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to paste these two lines. I'm going to press enter, and now it's going to notice that I already have it. As you can see, it already exists. Oh, but there's a new version. How awesome is that? Okay, so it basically updated it. So it basically just pulled the latest changes, and now it runs through the install script and asks me, do you want to enable fuzzy autocompletion? I'm going to say yes, and we're going to go through all of this stuff later. So we're basically going to say yes to everything. Key bindings, yes. Do you want to update your shell configuration files? I'm going to say no, because in my case this is an update. In your case you should say yes, and then it's going to go into your in my case this is ZSH, and I already have a couple of videos about ZSH. In this case it's going to go to ZSHRC, and it's going to add one tiny line in there which will initialize a couple of stuff. Okay, so I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say no because I already have it. All right, so now I have FZF. And by the way, if you're wondering if you always have to do this to update FZF, no, you don't. If you install it through a package manager, you don't. And also, if you're using Vim, which in my case is the case, I'm using Vim, and I'm using a plugin manager for Vim plugins. And the one that I'm using is called Vim Plug, and just as a coincidence, it is also created by exactly the same guy who created FZF. And the way it works is that it basically looks into the same directory, which is in my home directory .fzf, and it pretty much does exactly the same thing as my script is doing. So essentially, if you're a Vim user and you're using Vim FZF with some plugin manager, then you never have to update stuff manually, right? You just go into Vim, you're just doing your plug update in my case, and it will update the globally installed FZF version as well. Another, by the way, FZF can also be installed on Windows, albeit with some caveats. All right, so now that it is installed, let's run through a hello world example. So I'm going to clear the screen, and I'm simply going to say echo, and I'm going to create a string, which is going to be a list. Okay, so I'm going to say red, and I'm going to have the line separator, and then I'm going to have green, I'm going to have the line separator, and I'm going to have blue, okay, like this. Okay, so if I just press enter, we see the list, red, green, blue. Okay, so all I can do now is I can take it and I can just pipe it into fzf. Okay, and it will present this little thing for me. Okay, I can use the arrows to go up and down. I can start searching. For example, if I'm going to start typing something remotely related to green, like EEN, it will find green. Okay, I'm going to go back. And by the way, Emacs key bindings are working. So for example, if my cursor is here and I press Control E, it will go to the end. If I press Control U, it will remove stuff. Okay, so if you're familiar with Emacs key bindings, you can use them. Now, you can also use like the arrow keys. And if you're familiar with Vim key bindings, if you just press J, it's going to start searching for J. Okay, but you can hold Control, and then you can do Control J and Control K, to go up and down. So let me position the cursor at green, for example, and I'm going to press enter. All it will do is it will take this and simply print it out. Okay, let me show you also a couple of tiny flags. For example, you can do -m, which is the same for --multi, right? This will allow you to actually select multiple things. Okay, so instead of pressing enter, I'm going to press tab. So for example, I'm going to mark green and blue. So I'm going to press tab over here, and I'm going to press tab over here. Notice when you press tab, then also you can unselect. When you press tab, the cursor jumps down. When you press shift tab, it's doing exactly the same thing, but the cursor jumps up. Okay, so shift tab. Okay, there we go. So I selected blue and green. Now it doesn't matter where the cursor is. I'm going to press enter, and it's going to print out green and blue. Let me show you one more flag, which is cycle. Okay, and cycle just simply allows you to go in cycles, right? So you go up and it just never finishes. Okay, Control C exits without printing anything. Okay, there's also a flag I believe called reverse. Okay, and then it will be displayed like from the top to bottom, right? But it's exactly the same principle. You can type it blue, whatever, it's going to filter it. Honestly, I could stop this video right here because following the Nix philosophy, this is pretty much all it does. However, there are many things you can combine it with, and this tool it's a game changer, as I already mentioned. For example, you can type it print env to see all of your environment variables, but you can also take it and simply pipe it into fzf, and now you can search for the environment variables, like for example for something like pager. There we go, something like home. Okay, also small home, it's still going to find a little bit more. Notice that the search is fuzzy by default. There are a couple of things that you can change. For example, let's search for home. Okay, notice that over here it found like the letter H, letter O, M, E, but you can do a backtick over here, and it's going to search for exactly home. Okay, and I believe if you do like the capital letters, then it's going to look only for capital letters like this. Okay, in this case, you don't even need the backtick. Let's take something else. For example, these are my aliases, right? A bunch of them. So I can just take alias and I can just pipe it into fzf, and I can search for something like, as you can see, it's like 244. So I could search for something like git branch, and now I see all the aliases that are related to git branch. I don't need to select them, but I could, I'm just going to press enter. All it did is printed it out, right? It did not execute this command or anything like this. It just printed it out. Now, arguably the most prominent use case for fzf is to search for files. In fact, many people believe that because fzf, the name contains two F's, that it stands for some sort of file finder, but it's not. It stands for fuzzy finder. So a very typical thing to do would be to use the find command and to say, okay, let's find everything, but only the files, okay, not the directories. So let's find all the directories, and please let's not look for the hidden files. So I'm gonna use a regex over here. I'm gonna use a star, and I'm gonna stay front slash, okay, so whatever slash, okay, and then I'm gonna escape the dot, and I'm gonna use another star over here. Okay, so I'm going to find all the files. If I press enter, all of them are just being printed out like this. I'm actually going to kill it. So I'm gonna take it and I'm going to pipe it into fzf. Okay, as you can see, 44673. Now this use case is so typical that simply by tapping fzf, the tool has the ability to recognize that it was not piped into or that there are no parameters. Simply piping fzf would do exactly what I just did. In fact, I'm going to open another tab. I'm simply going to type fzf, and it did exactly this. As you can see, this is the first tab. It found 44673, 44673. By the way, it also has mouse support. Kind of cool. I just double clicked and it's selected. Okay, so let me close this tab. Let me do Control C. Let me do Control L. Now this brings me to configuration. Okay, so you can open the man page for fzf to search for all kinds of files and all kinds of flags, and then you can configure it. Now I would kind of prefer that it had a configuration file. However, it doesn't. The way you configure it, and by configure it I mean you change the defaults, right? Because you don't need to configure it, right? You can do fzf and pass in a couple of flags, but you can also change the defaults. So if you want to configure the defaults, you need to use environment variables. So you just use a couple of built-in environment variables, you put them into your ZSHRC or your .profile or whatever, and then the defaults are going to be changed. In fact, what we're going to do now is, first of all, I'm going to show you a couple of my aliases. So V stands for Vim, and Vim itself stands for &Vim. So I'm simply going to open my profile, and I'm going to search for FZF, and I have a couple of these variables over here. As you can see, judging by these lines, you usually see that this file is versioned because I'm synchronizing my my .files, and I have an awesome video. You should definitely check it out, how to do it with a tool called Stove. Okay, so I commented out these flags because I wanted to introduce FZF slowly to you. Okay, but the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to grab these two and we're going to comment them out. Okay, so the first one is the FZF default command. As you can see over here, that my default command does not use what we just did was find, right? So it does not do, where is it? Where is it? Fine. By the way, I just pressed Control R. You know, I wanted to show this later to you, but Control R is a default key binding to search through history. And remember when we were installing FZF, it asked us if you want to enable the key bindings. And since we said yes, it actually overrode the Control R key binding. So I pressed Control R. My history is being piped into FZF. So I'm doing find star. For some reason, it doesn't find this history. Maybe it's because it's in the other tab. Okay, maybe it's because it's over here. Okay, bad example. Okay, in any case, so instead of using the tool called find, I'm using the tool called FD. FD is an alternative to find, however, it doesn't try to mirror it feature for feature. This video is not about FD, but I'm gonna leave a link down in the description so that you can check it out. You just install it and you can use it. It's very, very similar to find. Okay, so I'm basically saying, you know, find, and you know, also just search for files. Don't use any colors, and please also show me the hidden files, because by default FD actually hides the hidden files. Okay. Now, this variable over here, the FZF default options, are the default options that are going to be passed into the default command. In my particular case, I just said, you know, please don't limit the height, and also use this this color palette. Okay, so now that I commented them out, and my ZSHRC is structured in such a way that it actually loads the .profile. Usually, this is not how it's done. However, in my particular case, I'm actually using WSL, and there were some issues, so I had to do it. So all I need to do is I need to open another tab, and these ones are already going to work. Okay, so open another tab, I type in FZF. As you can see, it found pretty much the same number. I believe it's the same number. I didn't pay attention. The colors are slightly different, and yeah, so as of right now, we actually don't see any other differences. So if I search for something like .scala, you're going to see that the colors are slightly different. You know, I'm using a slightly different green. This line over here uses a slightly different green. I'm synchronizing my .files, and my .files are on GitHub, so you can check them out if you're particularly curious about my color scheme. You can check it out. Now, as you can see, it uses pretty much regex. So for example, if I use dollar over here, it's going to look for the files that end with .scala. Or for example, I could search for build, and I'm going to search for, you know, exactly build like this. Okay, we don't see any difference. I'm going to show it to you later. Okay, so we can search for build, and then for files that end with SBT, like was this, and then we can say or, you know, or Scala, you know, dollar over here. I always missed the dollar. Okay, so now we're seeing like build and builder, and we're also seeing these ones. So I can go to the beginning and I can put this quote over here, and as you can see, it found like exactly the files that you know, that contain the word build, that end was either SBT or was Scala. Okay, so let's talk about the key bindings. Now we have already seen Control R. In fact, let me actually close Vim over here. I actually want to find this command. Yeah, so there we go, Control R, and I found that thing that I was typing in. Okay, it was either this one or this one, and I can press enter, and I can press enter again. So now we piped the regular find command into FZF. The two other key bindings that you have built in by sort of default is Control T and Alt C. Control T searches for both files and directories. Alt C searches for directories and switches into them. Now, by default, Control T searches for both files and directories. However, it is a very, very common use case to only want to search for files. And so if I open my profile and I'm going to search for FZF, you're going to see that my default Control T command, and I'm actually going to enable both of them. Okay. So my default Control T command is the default FZF command, which is this one, okay? And by default, it searches only for files, which is how I want to have it set up, okay? And for the options, I'm actually using a very cool preview flag of FZF, and it previews every file with a tool called bat, which is an alternative to cat, which uses colors, and it enables colors. It says, you know, please use please always use the colors and show me the first 50 lines of each individual file. Like these curly braces, they're basically the parameter. Okay, and for the Alt-C, we're doing basically a very similar thing, you know, but we're saying, you know, search for directories and not for files. So we have a D and not an F. Okay, and we're going to preview them with the tree command. Okay, tree, this -c stands also for color always, and this is going to be the parameter, and then pipe it into head of 50. So basically show me only the 50 lines of the directory structure. Okay, so we're pretty much done with the profile, so I'm simply going to close it. I'm going to open a new one over here, and I'm going to show you Control T. For example, I'm in my home folder. I'm going to do Control T. It simply opens this. As you can see, we have a nice preview on the right. So I'm going to search for files that end with Scala, $, like this. And as you can see, we have the Scala files on the right. I'm simply going down and I have a really nice preview. So I can press enter over here, for example, like this. As you can see, just pasted it into my command line, right? So it's a very typical use case to do something like V, you know, to go for Vim, and then to press space and then to press Control T, and then it will search. Now it always searches in this particular directory. Okay, so if I do again like Scala $, okay, so I'm going to find like this file, for example, dependencies. I'm going to press enter and it's going to do this. I press enter again, it is open. In a couple of seconds I'm going to show you sort of like it's called autocompletion, but it's not like this autocompletion that you do like fzf and then you do like hyphen and then you press tab and there is no completion. This is the completion that I'm getting from the auto suggestion plugin. So it just looks into my history and shows me the last command that I entered. Okay, so it should have auto completed to version, but for some reason it doesn't. However, this is not the auto completion that I'm talking about. This is the auto completion that I'm talking about that is over here. So for example, I could go like somewhere over here and I can do like 2 stars, and sometimes people call them asterisks. Okay, and if I press tab, the difference between Control T and this is that it will actually search inside of dev, you know, invoice tool. Okay, so I'm going to press tab. As you can see, we're all over here. Okay, so I'm going to search for something like main. I'm going to see it over here and I'm going to open it was Vim, and this is the main. Okay, so let me quit from here. Okay, by the way, I'm having some issues with the Windows terminal. Like sometimes the lines are not rendered perfectly. If I press F5, it goes away. This is just an issue with Windows Terminal. In fact, it's just an issue that is only appears in the combination with a terminal multiplexer that I'm using over here, which is Biobu. We're going to get to that. As already mentioned, the other key binding is Alt-C, and please make sure that these key bindings don't collide with anything inside of your terminal or your operating system. In fact, a friend of mine recently installed fzf, and he had an issue because he was on a Mac, and by default, iTerm does not like the Alt key, so he had to go into the settings and you know, enable some checkbox. All right, so I'm going to press Alt-C, and as you can see, it searches now for only for directories. Like for example, I know that I have a dev directory, and inside of it I have a directory called type level. So I'm going to search for type level. As you can see, and found it. It's inside of dev, inside of GitHub, inside of type level, and I'm seeing, you know, the first 50 lines. Okay, so I can go down, nice previews. And in this particular case, as soon as I'm gonna press enter, it's not going to simply print it out. It is actually going to change the directory into it. Okay, there we go. As already mentioned, some rendering issues. Let's search for another folder. And by the way, every time you press Alt-C, it starts to search based on the directory where you're currently in. So I'm going to do CD, I'm going to do Control L, I'm going to do Alt-C now, and I'm going to search for dev inside you, for example, and I'm going to do for exactly install, and not, you know, as you can see, we have some .github over here. So I can say not .github, okay? And I found like all of my install directories, and they're all very similar. Okay, so for example, this one is install fzf, so now I'm in there. Let's go back to the auto completions a little bit. So for example, we can go into my home folder again, okay, and I can do something like V, okay, and I can do like, this is my auto suggestion, so I can do dev, I can do, you know, GitHub, and then dev inside. It kind of takes like a long time to do all of this, okay, but now I can do some like source, and I can do star, and what I want to show you is that I can actually select multiple files. So for example, I know that in this particular project there are 4 main files. So if I search for main, we actually found all of them, okay, and I'm going to say, okay, so I'm interested in the second one, so I'm going to do tab over here, and then the fourth one, so I'm going to do tab over here. I'm going to press enter. It's going to paste both of them, and because I started with V, it is actually going to start Vim, and it's going to open both of them over here and over here. Okay, let me get out of here. By the way, a quick thing that I forgot to mention, if I go into my profile and search for FZF again, okay? Now, FZF can never know what it is viewing. So as you can see over here, I'm using the preview command over here. And because I know that I configured my Control T to only search for files, then I know with which tool to preview it, which is BAT. Okay, over here is the same thing for the directories. I know that I configured Alt C to look only for directories, which it does by default, but I had to switch to FD because I prefer it. By the way, the reason I switched to FD is just because it's a bit faster. It's a bit more modern. It has awareness of Git repositories, for example. Okay. Now, because over here I know that it's files. I know that it's directories. I know which tool to use to preview it. That said, I have seen some people configure their FZF in such a way that the default options would use the preview command, right? And then basically, if it fails, they would do or preview with some other tool, right? And in this case, if you're piping any sort of list, it will try to preview it as a file, then it will try to preview it as a tree, and then in the other case, it's probably going to fail, and it's going to fall back to not previewing at all. I haven't played with this setup yet, and so because of this, and this is how I remember it. If I press Control T, I'm actually not running through the. I'm sorry. If I press Control T, I'm actually running through the preview command. However, if I do this thing over here, I should do the what did I do? Like that, like this, for example. Okay, star. So if I do this, as you can see, like even though it's files, it actually doesn't have a preview. In fact, in this case, it's not just files; it's directories and files, and this is why I'm not using the preview command. I just wanted to point out this this tiny difference. Okay, now this autocompletion, it actually also is built into a couple of other things. And by the way, you can change these asterisks or stars to some other symbol, but I didn't have a use case for this yet. I didn't have the need, so I didn't do it. Okay. Now another one that is sort of built in is I'm going to use BAT to go into EDC hosts, okay, which is over here. And by the way, I could have done BAT and then EDC and then star and then tab and then search for hosts, right, and then press enter and then open it. Okay. So as you can see, like these are my EDC hosts. So if I do SSH and then star and then I press tab, then it's actually going to start searching through them. As you can see, like I configured it in such a way that it always clears the whole screen. Okay, but let's say I want to do a local host. I'm going to press enter and there we go. Now there are some rendering issues, but as you can see, it actually did the right thing. So it pasted the SSH localhost. So if I press enter, it will actually try to SSH into localhost. Another thing that is built in is the kill command. So if I open something like htop and I do like something like shift F2, as I already mentioned, I'm running in a terminal multiplexer. Okay, so I can do something like kill -9, and notice that this time we're not using the stars. Okay, so I'm just going to do space and I'm going to press tab, and once I press tab, FZF is going to open and I'm going to search for something like htop. I'm going to press enter. Again, I have some issue with these ANSI codes, but as you can see, it pasted the process ID in there. Okay, so now if I press enter, it's simply going to kill it. All right, so as I already mentioned, I'm running in a terminal multiplexer called Biobu, and I have a couple of videos about it. You can check them out if you like. Biobu is simply a wrapper around either tmux or screen. It's tmux by default, and so I'm using the default as well. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that FZF also comes with a tiny little bash script or ZSH script called fzf-tmux. Okay, and if you run fzf-tmux, you can pass in a couple of commands, and it will notice that if you're inside of a tmux session, then it will do something awesome for you. If you're not in the tmux session, then it will simply fall back to the regular FZF. So if you're writing some scripts with maybe terminal multiplexers in mind, feel free to use fzf-tmux as a replacement to FZF, because if you're not inside of a session, it will simply fall back to the regular FZF. Okay, so if I simply do FZF, it's going to do this. However, if I do what did I do? I press Control C. Hold on. Let me close this. Okay. So if I do the regular FZF, it does this. Okay. So if I do Control C, then press Control L. And if I do fzf-tmux instead, it's going to do a very similar thing, but it's going to do it in the pane underneath. Okay. So let's say that I want to select this file. I'm going to press enter. It's going to close this pane and simply paste it over there. Now, the reason why you might be interested in doing this is because you actually have control over multiplexer panes. So for example, first of all, you can pass in some parameters. You can say, okay, please open it on the right and use only like 30% of space, something like this. And this is what it did, right? And now you can use the key bindings to actually, resize it, right? So this is probably the only reason why you would want to use it, because FZF actually comes with a flag of, I think it's height. I'm not sure, I believe I need to do equals. Let's do like 30% or something like this. Yeah, so as you can see, like right now it took like only 30% of my screen, okay? But in my dot profile, like usually if I do FZF, it will take like all the 100 spaces, right? So technically you can do this if you don't want to fill out the full screen. But with tmux, it's kind of better because then you have control. You can rearrange the panes. You can do all the kinds of things that you would usually do with a multiplexer. Okay, so it works exactly the same, right? So you can just grab the aliases, for example. You can, instead of piping into FZF, you can pipe it into tmux, and you can say, okay, let's open it on the left, and I don't know, use like 75% of space, something like this. Okay, so as you can see, it's now on the left. I can search for an alias like git branch, like this one. I press enter, the tab closes. You know, there's also an environment variable that you can set that will always default to fzf-tmux. So if you do export fzf_tmux and just set it to 1, okay, then for things like just fzf, it seems like it's not working, but for things like Control T, it actually works, right? So I press Control T, and even though it's by default should call fzf, because I have this variable, it actually fell back to fzf-tmux. Okay, I believe the same thing is for Alt C, the same thing is for history, Control R. Okay. So it's really, really convenient. So if you prefer, let me actually close another tab because I don't want this variable to be initialized. Let me actually close this one. Okay, so now if I do Control R, it actually opens like I configured it to be opened. Okay, all right, so we're pretty much done. I'm just going to show you a couple of more tricks, and also I'm going to show you the Vim integration. So I have a couple of aliases that come from ZSH, technically from all my ZSH. By default, it comes with the Git plugins. So if I open my ZSH RC and I'm going to search for plugins, by default, it comes with the Git plugin, which is enabled. Okay, so if I just do alias G, you know, G is Git, I do alias GB, this Git branch, alias GBR, this is Git branch remote. Okay, and now the one that I created myself, which is GCO, which is Git checkout, and then use the git branch and pipe it into fzf, execute the command, whatever comes out, go into there. And the same thing for the remote version. Okay, so GCOR for remote is going to do git checkout, you know, track GBR, you know, which is this one, pipe it into fzf. Okay, so for example, let's go into type level cats. So I just pressed Alt C. I'm going to type level cats. I'm going to do GL just in case to see if there are any new changes. It's going to pull them down real quick. There we go. Okay, so I can do, for example, git checkout remote branch. I'm going to press enter. It's going to show me all the branches. I have no idea what I'm looking for. So for example, remove and then casts. So I'm going to look for casts, and I'm going to look for, and then I'm going to press enter, and bam, it checked out this remote branch. It's really, really cool. Another one, like if you've seen my the video about course here, then I have built in one, you know, called FCSI. It will simply search through whatever course here has to install, and you know, I'm going to search for mail, for example. I'm going to press enter, and it's going to start installing it right away, right? So the sky is the limit with these things, right? You can like pipe whatever you want into FZF. You can write like any kind of script you liked. Okay, so for example, right now I actually installed mail that I actually don't need, so I'm going to uninstall mail like this. FZF actually comes in with a wiki which has a bunch of awesome examples. Most of them are only working with ZSH, but still. So I picked one particular one. I'm actually going to go over here to my other virtual desktop. Okay, so this is the wiki / examples and then hash git. Okay, so this is a bunch of cool little functions that you can pretty much steal and, you know, put into your ZSH RC or whatever. So the one that I want to play around with is a bit lower. It's over here, fshow. So this is the git commit browser. So I'm simply going to grab it. Okay, I'm going to go back over here. I'm going to paste it. Okay, I'm going to press enter. So now I have access to fshow. So I'm going to do fshow. I'm going to press enter. There we go. This is the commit browser. So let's say that I'm looking for this commit, enum type classes, enum type classes. Okay, I'm going to press enter. Bam, and I'm seeing the diff. I can see all the things that have changed. I press Q, I'm back into the browser, so I can do Control U because Emacs key bindings, remember, everything is cleared. I'm going to look for something else. For example, I don't know, SBT sonotype, SBT sonotype, sonotype, like this. Found this one, press enter. Let's see what changed. Okay, this is just a version update. Okay, Q, Control C, I'm out again. Okay, the sky is the limit. There are so many scripts out there. Grab them, play around with them. All right, so the only thing that is left to do is for me to show you the FZF integration. So I have an alias called vim p. Okay, it simply opens a file with Vim, and this is the file where I list all the plugins that the Vim plug plugin for Vim is going to look for things to install. Okay, so if I just do vim p, it's simply going to open this file, and these are all of my plugins. And as you can see, 2 of them are for fzf. Okay, and as a reminder, fzf was created by this person, Jun Gun, and vim plug that I'm using for Vim has also been created for this, by exactly the same person. Okay, so over here, I'm basically saying, you install fzf vim, but also install the regular fzf. And as you can see, it installs it into the into the regular destination. And so every time I'm doing something like plug update, it downloads the updates for all of these plugins, and among them is for fzf. Okay, so in fact for fzf vim as well. Let's do r. Sometimes like it always matters that has this problem. Okay, so it pretty much downloaded the updates and also for fzf as well. Let's get out of here. Another alias that I have is config, and it simply I'm sorry, I wanted to show it to you. It changes the directories to my dotfiles directory, which is the one that I'm using to synchronize all of my dot files. Now I'm just going to do v space control T. It's going to start searching in this directory, right? I believe before I said that it's going to always start searching from the home directory. No, it's always starts searching from the current directory. Okay, Control T and both Alt C. Okay, it's just that with the autocompletion, with a ***, it will actually understand what you typed in. Okay, so I'm going to do Control T and I'm going to do fzf. Okay, and as you can see, bam, it found my settings for fzf. As you can see, I actually don't have many things in there. I'm just using the colors. Let me actually open the entire, all of my dot files. I'm just going to do v dot. Okay, and by default it presents us with this thing, but I actually have the key bindings. One of them is Control P, which is to search for all the files, and the other one is Alt P, which is to search for all the buffers. So for example, I'm going to do Control P. As you can see, fzf is built in. I'm searching for fzf. This is exactly the same plugin. Okay, in fact, I'm going to actually search for keys, right? So this is another file called keys, and over here I have something for fzf, which is just these two. Okay, Control P and Alt P. Okay, so let's actually open, let's close this one. Let's actually open some of the file, like, I don't know, my bash aliases. Okay, so now I have 2 buffers open. Let's actually open another one. I don't know what I want to open, but let's go for tmux conf. Okay, so now 3 buffers are open. Now I can do Alt P because I configured it in such a way, and it's going to search through only my buffers. As you can see, I cannot choose the tmux conf because this is the one that is currently open. However, I can go into, I don't know, config, config, enter, and it's going to switch to this buffer. Okay, so that's pretty much it. As I already mentioned, like the regular completions don't work for some reason. Like I'm not sure why, whatever I'm doing, like tab, like for some reason, I don't know, nothing is actually working there. If you know how to fix it, just please let me know in the comments. I'm actually really curious. I just recorded a video about completions, and then I was like, I want to have fzf completions, and for some reason they didn't work for me. Some people on the internet are saying that it's probably colliding with some ZSH plugins. I tried to disable a couple of them. It actually didn't help. So if you know, please let me know. All right, so as already mentioned a couple of times, I've shown you just the basics, but the sky is the limit. So please take fzf for a spin. It's going to change your life, I'm pretty sure. In any case, for now, as always, it's been Vlad, devinsideyou.com. Don't forget to like this video if you did, subscribe if you want to improve the developer inside you. And if you learned something today, consider support me on GitHub sponsors or Patreon, whatever you prefer. And let's watch my videos weeks or sometimes even months before everyone else. And most importantly, take care.